call the Dallas City Council work session to order for Monday, September 16th, 2024. Do you want to call a roll?
Council President Schilling.
Here.
Councilor Adams.
Here.
Councilor Barrientos.
Here.
Councilor Briggs.
Here.
Councilor Collins. Councilor Fitzgerald.
Here.
Councilor Shane.
Here.
Councilor Burton.
Here.
Councilor Jantz is excused.
Councilor Collins is on her way.
So she's on time.
She's not on time, she's just on her way.
On her time. Okay, first thing on the agenda is the Rehab Transfer Station presentation. Mr. Manager.
All right, thank you, Mayor Woods. So you might have read in the newspaper recently that Rehab is a transfer station that is looking to come to Polk County. And their owner is here tonight, as well as Polk County. We have Austin McGuigan and Greg Hansen. And so they've been doing some presentations around other jurisdictions in Polk County on what their proposal is, and impacts it would have to the jurisdictions in Polk County. Certainly with the new transfer facility, there will be some additional cost to our residents for the use of that facility. I'm sure Nick and Austin will get into more detail on that. But certainly tonight is just a good opportunity to learn more about the project, ask questions, get an understanding of timing, other things of that nature. So with that, I'll turn the time over to Nick or Austin or both.
Good evening, Mayor Woods, Council President Schilling, members of the council. Thank you for inviting us here to do this work session. For you that don't know me, I'm Austin McGuigan. I'm the Community Development Director for Polk County. And we've received an unsolicited proposal to franchise a solid waste transfer facility in Polk County. To start with a little bit of background, our Polk County Comprehensive Plan calls for the need for a transfer facility in the Rick Riall Dallas area. And it's based on the regional Chemeketa plan that we began participating in the 1970s. And we had IGAs with local counties to manage waste and develop a regional waste plan. And as the state of Oregon Department of Environmental Quality reduced our waste sheds essentially to our political boundaries, we didn't really have a need to continue to have these IGAs, but we've continued to stay the course of the regional plan that was set forth. And that regional plan essentially said that when the Monmouth landfill closes and we become dependent on the North Marion County landfill, which is Coffin Butte, that we really will need a transfer facility in Rick Riall and a backup solid waste disposal site. We have no interest in proposing any type of a backup solid waste disposal site, but we do continue to have interest in the need for a transfer facility. And really where the Yamhill County Riverbend landfill recently closed. And when the Riverbend landfill, that was our backup landfill site to Coffin Butte. If something was to happen at Coffin Butte, even temporarily, like the fire that they had in 1999, that we would need another location for us to take waste. And so I started to open up our solid waste transfer franchises to those agreements to have our franchise haulers identify a backup location. And well, we started to do that. We started with Valley Recycling in Salem, which has access to the Marion County facilities, and we started to have discussions with Josh Brandt. Then the Rehab facility owner, Nick Dahl, who's here today, he came and approached us with a proposal to franchise a transfer facility in Polk County. As a result of that, I stopped the negotiations on our franchise agreements and decided that we should really take a look at this franchise proposal. We took it to the Board of Commissioners. The Polk County Board of Commissioners has directed Administrator Hansen and I to basically do some fact finding. And by the fact finding, we really need to get a sense of what are the needs of our individual cities that are also dependent on the waste infrastructure that we have in Polk County. And so with that, we first started to meet with our franchise haulers. We wanted to have a better understanding of what the needs of our franchise haulers were and whether or not they had objections to a transfer facility, what their pain points would be with that, what the benefits, what is their wish list if we had one. And we concluded those interviews with our franchisees several months ago. And then from there, we started to hit our cities. And we started with Salem, and we had a meeting with the Salem Solid Waste Committee, which is made up of 3 of the city's councilors. And then we also did a presentation for a joint Monmouth and Independence councils. They did a joint work session for us a few weeks ago to make this proposal. And really, the reason why we need to really listen to the cities is because in order for a regional transfer facility for the county to operate, all of that, the waste from our waste shed needs to go through the transfer facility. We need that throughput in order to keep the cost down. And so why would we need a transfer facility? So a transfer facility, and why Polk County has an interest in a transfer facility, is because we don't have any resiliency. We're dependent entirely on other counties. And as Coffin Butte comes to the end of its life, we're going to continue to see increased costs to all of our communities. And we have very little leverage, essentially, to negotiate better tipping rates. And so the proposal that we have for this particular facility, its rate impacts, which we'll talk about in a minute, and I'll have Nick talk about that. Those rate impacts are predicated on moving our waste on wheels out to Boardman, Oregon, and not continuing to go to Coffin Butte. And we aren't necessarily looking to haul our waste out to Eastern Oregon, but we really want to get an idea of what would those impacts be on our community if we had to do that. And so the numbers that we talk about, they're predicated on that. And that's different than if we would hope to continue to have a relationship with Coffin Butte and continue to be able to take our waste there at a low cost. But there have been some significant changes as well in our waste infrastructure in our region. Not only did the Riverbend landfill in Yamhill County close, which increased the amount of tonnage that is being accepted at Coffin Butte. The Covanta incinerator is now closed. And that means that all of that waste that was being disposed of through the incinerator now has to move most likely to Coffin Butte. And that's going to impact the life of Coffin Butte. And if you've been following the Republic Services annual reports on Coffin Butte, they claim that Coffin Butte has a 12.9, this was 2 months ago, a 12.9 year life expectancy. That's without Covanta closing, which is, there's 180,000 tons there that are additional that have to find some place to go. And so 12.9 years kind of sounds like a while, but it takes years to site a transfer facility. It takes years to expand a landfill. And if the landfill, if the Coffin Butte landfill, if they approve the conditional use permit, which they have to expand it, that conditional use permit adds only 6 years to the life of Coffin Butte. So this is something that we believe that we do need to start planning for, whether it's this franchise for a transfer facility, whether it's something else. We believe at the county that we need to start addressing it, and it's something that's going to impact all of our communities, and Polk County wants to be ahead of that. We're trying to do that with water, we're trying to do that with waste infrastructure, and so here we are today. I will note before we start to talk about really some of the rate impacts and what this facility would look like. We are talking about whether we should grant a franchise, whether there's a need for a transfer facility in our region. Not necessarily the impacts of siting it and locating it. That will happen through a separate conditional use process. And so regardless of whether Polk County decides to grant the franchise to this applicant, to another entity, it's a completely separate process to try to site that facility and deal with the potential externalities that are associated with a facility. And so this is a question of whether or not we should franchise a transfer facility in the county, not necessarily the details of how to site it. I would also like to note that that Polk County has contracted with an independent consultant, Chris Bell, who's a certified public accountant. We have utilized him to analyze particularly the rate structure and pro forma that was provided by the applicant for this franchise. We provided that to City Manager Lotta, and we can talk a little bit more detail about those rate impacts, kind of how it was structured. But our consultant's analysis came back slightly lower than slightly lower. No, yours for Dallas it was slightly higher, just ever so slightly higher than what the applicant showed. For other communities, it came back slightly lower. So the variables are pretty close, and I think that what was presented to Polk County from the applicant was a genuine analysis and assessment that we found with our own independent assessment to be the variables to be relatively true and accurate. And we are making that consultant available to all of our communities at our cost. If your city manager has additional questions or concerns or wants additional analysis on certain aspects of this, we're happy to dive in and look at those things, because we want the best answers, and we want to be able to make the best, most informed decision that we can at the county. And so I want to make sure that you're all aware that we are offering that as part of this. And then timeline-wise, we really want to get a handle first on whether or not Polk County wants to grant this franchise. And we would like to try to make a decision on this sometime this fall. I know that maybe seems optimistic for something of this scale, but that's really the timeline that we're looking at. And so what does that mean for the cities, and how would this work? So in order for us to make sure that the facility had the throughput that it needs to financially be able to keep the cost as low as possible to our citizens, we would need our cities to also essentially instruct through your franchise agreements that your franchise hauler move your waste through this facility. And some communities may want to, some communities may not want to. And so the way that we envision this occurring at the county is through intergovernmental agreements. And the numbers that we're sharing in terms of the potential rate impact is assuming that all of the waste that's generated in Polk County is moving through this facility. If, let's say, Independence or Monmouth or Dallas or anyone or Falls City decides that they don't want to participate, we would have to come back and do a new analysis on the pro forma and make a determination of what those costs could be and what that cost impact would be to each community. And because of that, the county is kind of coming early and talking to all of the cities so that we have the opportunity to start talking about an intergovernmental agreement and whether or not you can start to explore whether or not you have an interest before we actually issue a franchise. And so at the end of this, what we're hoping is that you'll continue to work with us and your legal counsel to work with us to explore an IGA, or to give us direction that you're not interested, or that you need additional information, and really what that information would be and whether or not we're able to provide that or the applicant is able to address it. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to the applicant, Mr. Nick Dahl, to give a quick PowerPoint presentation, and then we can come back and we can talk about what those financial impacts to the city would be.
Mayor, City Council President, City Council, thank you for your time tonight. Appreciate being in front of you guys tonight. I'm Nick Dahl, owner and president of Apple Tree Companies. And obviously here to give a presentation on Rehub. Who is Apple Tree? Apple Tree Holdings is Lawrence Sanitation Services, we LLC. Lawrence is a collection company that's based out of Kaiser, Oregon, and we service Kaiser, part of the city of Salem, and some of Marion County on the collection side of the world. Wheat LLC is a regional transport company. We transport waste throughout the state of Oregon, out the backside of the Marion Resource Recycling Facility, which we are also part owners of. That is a facility in Brooks, Oregon that handles about 2/3 of all Marion County's waste. We process it, we sort out the construction demolition debris, and then we move that to end markets. And a big chunk of it does move down to Coffee Butte landfill. Ferris Lumber takes some of the wood for the biomass side of the world, and then it goes to other end markets too, including other commingled MRFs, compost facilities, and other end markets throughout the state. We are also co-owners of North Marion Recycling and Disposal, and that is a collection company out of, it's based in Kaiser, but we service up into St. Paul and Donald in the northern part of Marion County. Also, we have an in-depth multiple generations solid waste experienced management team. Myself, I'm third generation in the waste industry. I've been president of the Oregon Refuse Recycle Association, chair of the West Coast Board, president of my family's company off the coast. So a lot of generations of experience, been in landfills, collection companies, transfer facilities, been pretty diverse in my waste portfolio and background. So why did we choose Polk County and why are we sitting here tonight? It really started with the closing of Riverbend landfill. So at one time there's 3 different end markets really of solid waste end markets. So what goes to a landfill or an incinerator in this mid-Willamette Valley. Riverbend landfill closed. It was trying to get an expansion. It went through the expansion process, actually got approved several times. It got appealed to Beluga. Went back to the voters for votes. Actually Yamhill County voters voted on it, approved the expansion. It still went to the courts. By the end, the landfill's closed. So it closed. Then you start talking about, you have 2 end markets left here. You have Covanta and you had Coffeyville landfill. Well, Covanta, as of last week, announced to their employees that they will be closing at the end of this week. That is leaving you 1 end market for all your waste right here in the Mid-Valley.
They gave you 1 week's notice they were closing?
To their employees, they're at this end of the year.
So it operates until the end of December.
So they'll be, and then they'll have to burn out some stuff, waste and other stuff throughout the first couple of months. So that is the next one closing. What does that mean? It's really leaving you 1 end market in the middle of the valley. That's Coffeyville landfill. And without a transfer facility, you cannot move your waste out of this community into the multiple landfills that have lots of years of capacity in Eastern Oregon and Eastern Washington. In fact, sorry, yes.
I'm sorry, just for edification for everybody who's watching in the rest of the world, can you please tell everybody, what is a transfer facility?
Okay, so it's great. Sorry, I've been in the industry forever. So solid waste transfer facilities where you take your collection trucks in public and they come in and you rebulk the material. So,
Can you also say what rebolting is?
Rebulking. So basically take a 7.5 ton load and you bulk it into a 29 ton load. So basically it's like a reverse distribution center, okay? So imagine a distribution center. You have these big, large transport trucks that come from the end factories and everything else, and they show up and they break all that material apart and it ends up at your households. So think on the backside of an economy. So the backside of an economy, you have the waste. It comes out of the households, it's collected by your collection trucks, and then it ends up, and sometimes it ends up directly in markets locally. Well, when those end markets start shutting down, it has to go through basically a reverse distribution kind of center. And some of that reverse distribution centers are waste transfer facilities of today. And we'll get into a little bit more into that. In the first generation ones, let me not skip too far. I actually have to touch on that.
Okay, great.
A little bit in the
I just want to
presentation
make sure that
stuff.
everybody who didn't,
Yeah, sorry, you
Google all of this,
get me
can
kind of
understand.
like excited here a little bit, so let me just back up here a
Thanks.
little bit and we'll get into that stuff. So, okay, so we started looking at Polk County and saying, look, Polk County has no waste infrastructure here. They have nothing. They haven't really planned for the future. And Polk County's also been fortunate. They sat in between 2 major regional landfills. So they had the benefit of that. They had the benefit of being able to shop their pricing and look for competitive pricing. Well, when you go down to 1 regional landfill, you can't shop your pricing. It's 1. So that's the challenge. And without a transfer facility to be able to move your waste out of here, if something happens in that end market, what are you gonna do with your waste? If you have no waste infrastructure. So anyhow, getting Chemeketa back in the 70s, it was actually identified by our grandparents, my parents and others in the community, private waste industry, and our leaders, right? They identified, okay, when we start closing these localized landfills. So Monmouth had a landfill, Lincoln County had several landfills. We actually ran one in South County, we ran in counties in Aga Beach and Newport. And so when those started closing, because of Subtitle D regulations, a lot of the environmental regulations started coming in, requiring liners, and they required a leachate to be collected, brought to wastewater treatment facilities, capping your landfills, start collecting methane. There's a lot of regulations that came into play. Well, that closed a lot of your localized landfills out. And so in those regions, we put in transfer facilities. And those are more your first generation. Polk County didn't have to do that. So we'll skip this now. Okay, so what is your current system? Right now on the left is more Polk County's current system. You have your communities. In order for all the waste, all the public to deal with it, they all have to leave Polk County. It's pretty much free-for-all, right? There's no organization to the system right now. And they've been able to have the benefit of that, right? So you had the landfills that were pretty close, neighboring counties. You had a MRF that was right sitting in material resource facility, material recycling facility, so where they break apart the commingled recycling and construction debris and stuff like that. So, and they sort it all out. You have one for your commingled that is sitting in Salem, Garden Industries. If something happened to Garden, what would you do with your commingled? You have to take your green waste outside the communities to regional compost facilities, and when those cap out, what are you going to do with that if you can't move it? So then you take a look at the future system, and by putting a transfer hub, we call them hubs now, because we're doing so much more than just a single source. And then you rebulk all that material and you ship it out. Ship it out to compost facilities, ship it out the regional landfills that are outside the area. Like Eastern Oregon's a really, actually, in Eastern Washington, drier climates are really good locations for landfills. Right now, on the west side, you got to deal with a ton of leachate. I think there's about 30 million gallons of leachate coming out the backside of Coffin Butte landfill alone that ends up at all these local sewer plants, and then from there it's diluted. But over in Eastern Oregon, they have evaporation ponds. It's so dry, they can evaporate all that material, all that liquid out. They also have capped landfills. They break down a lot slower, so they can capture the methane much easier in order to reuse it through burners and everything else. So that is kind of, okay, so this is kind of the if you put a transfer facility in, what would happen? It'd be right in the middle of the hub. It'd be very organized, structured. It'd come together here, rebulked, shipped to your end markets.
Before you go any further, so there is no transfer facility anywhere nearby now. Where's all the stuff going now when it leaves here?
So
It's directly tipped at Coffin Butte.
So it's going straight to the landfill?
Yeah, in Polk County, all of our franchises tip directly at Coffin Butte. And so part of what this proposal would allow a transfer facility, and doing a transfer facility now allows for Polk County to control rates, which is important, and that rate control is going to help guarantee it'll provide some certainty into the future about what our costs would be. And it would allow all of our franchises together to collectively negotiate a tipping fee at Coffin Butte rather than each one of our franchises individually negotiating that with Republic Services.
I also get the impression, because you've mentioned several times about facilities closing and that Coffin Butte is going to have to eventually. I get the impression that what we're really talking about here in large measure is a long-term strategy. Is that accurate?
correct. That is absolutely accurate, and that's what a lot of your surrounding communities face. They faced what you're facing today years ago. Lincoln County faced it in the 90s. We built in transfer facilities. Now they're first generation, and they will be updated too, but they've built in the resiliency into their system so they can get the waste out to multiple end markets. So they'll never really ever have this issue that you're facing because they faced it earlier.
So part of the
Marion
reason-
County faced it earlier too. They have waste infrastructure in play. Now they have some first generation transfer facilities that they're going to have to deal with. We have a modern facility in Brooks, Oregon, that can help, take all that commercial waste from Marion County and rebulk it and move it east when that's time.
So part of the reason for looking at this now is so that we're ready when Coffin Butte does go away.
Correct, and then we'll get into,
That's part of Polk County's interest.
yeah, and we'll get into timing and why. Like, you're 12 years out, and a lot of people think, we're talking 12 years, Nick. Like, what are we talking today? Well, we'll get into why and how long it takes to site waste facilities. So,
We understand long-term planning.
Okay.
At the moment, we're right in the middle of looking at building a new reservoir. We get it about long-term.
okay, you get it. So.
I don't want to drag this out, but back to that slide for a minute. Could you go back one page,
Okay,
please?
No problem. There you go.
I'll make it brief. So right now, you mentioned all of our waste ends up in Coffin Butte.
Plus Garden, plus PRC.
That's those other lines.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to
It used
ask.
to end up in River Bend.
Okay.
Some of it, and then some of it used to end up, Recology has some compost facilities that ended up there, so it was spread all over the place. And still, all we're talking about is landfill stuff, landfill waste, ending up at Coffin View right now, because that's the option.
So the recyclable truck that comes by and gets my cardboard goes to Garden.
Coast Guard, yes.
Okay, I got it now.
No,
Thank
Austin,
you.
Austin,
you
I
have to
also,
go and-
I also got something else from what you said earlier. Let me see if I got it accurately. Part of the reason for looking at this is also so that we have some bargaining leverage going down the.
You're absolutely right. What some of our concern is not that, we've had a very good relationship with Public Services in Coffin Butte. We've been very, very fortunate to have the proximity to the landfill that we've had. But what we're concerned about is just good business, not malicious, just good business. And that as you have less airspace in the landfill, that space that's left becomes more valuable, right? So Benton County has a cap on the total amount of waste that's allowed into Coffin Butte. It's 1.1 million tons per year. And that can only be lifted if they're able to expand. If they don't get the expansion, that cap stays. And with Covanta closing, it's likely that Benton County is going to be very close, that Coffin Butte's going to be very close to Benton County's cap.
Sure, that's going to create upward pressure on prices. I guess.
Absolutely. And that's what we're concerned about from the county's perspective.
And in a competitive market, when you have no competitors, price is gonna go up for elasticity. So, okay, so right now, when you take, some of our estimated studies have shown that when you take and you reload your material, send it to a central location in Polk County, there's approximately a savings of about 33,000 gallons of diesel a year, just because all those trucks are now going to a central location, very conveniently located, and that's why logistics, there's a whole, and we'll go through logistics and planning of transfer centers here in a second, and location, and why it's so critical to have them planned in the right location, because of the absolute energy savings that we can produce. And this is using the current system, so this is all current end markets, just by rebulking it within your current system. Okay, now let's talk about why we're talking about it today. We're not talking about it 12 years from now. We actually started siting and due diligence in 2018 for this project. And I was looking at multiple different sites. I was first looking at the market studies, then multiple siting locations, working with realtors, trying to tie the locations up, and then going through due diligence on those. And it's very expensive to go through all your due diligence on your different sites. We've had 2 other real serious sites tied up, and we went through a logistical study too. So it's all about siting location, which actually ended up showing very similar to what Polk County showed, which was sited in the Rickville area, and that's simple logistics. It's about location and distance to communities where the bulk of the material is, so it's the most central location.
Over 80% of our waste is generated within 10 miles of Rickville.
So in 3
Can you
different.
say that again?
Nearly 80% of our waste is generated within 10 miles of.
What do you mean by our?
Polk County's waste. So we're talking about Polk County's waste stream that you're a part of.
So City of Dallas, West Salem, Monmouth Independence, that's the bulk of the waste created here in Polk County. And right in between sits
Rick Reel.
Rickreall. So then you start looking around the Rickreall area, and a lot of it's tillable ground, a lot of it is in floodplain. There's a lot of challenges with trying to site a location in Rickreall. And there's transportation overlay zones that we ran into. So finally there is an opportunity, and shame. Louis was looking at what to do as his next steps.
This is the Rickreall
Dairy Farm. He's looking at what to do in his next steps of his career. He's towards the end of his career, and to stay competitive in the dairy industry, he had about 3,500 head of cattle there, and he was looking at actually expanding it up to pushing 6,000 head of cattle. And the reason why is he had to stay competitive in the market space. That would have put a lot more barns out there. It would have put a lot more expense into his, what he would have had to do in order to stay competitive. He made a choice to look at the market space for selling the dairy off. At that point in time, we approached him. We weren't interested in the entire dairy, but what we were interested in is his facilities. And that's excluding the pond and a little bit of a gravel area near the pond. And the reason why, obviously, the pond's going to take some time to flush out, but also the pond is an integral part of the farm. And it sits there as the irrigation portion of it. So everything's pumped out of Rickreall Creek, it goes in, and then it can be flushed out to the fields. So in order for him to sell it, if they can can find additional value. Now, if they say as dry farming, there's no issue, no need for it, but it's still part of this infrastructure of the farm. We want to make sure we kept that farm whole.
And I want to point out that we're not talking about the siting of the transfer facility here today. Polk County is interested in the need for the franchise. And if Polk County Board of Commissioners decides to grant a franchise to Rehub, then the Polk County Board of Commissioners would go through a public land use process to make a determination on siting. And so I just want to be clear that what we're looking for from the county is not an approval of the location or the site, but really the need for a transfer facility.
But for us even to be able to approach the county, we had to identify a site, we had to have the location, and then obviously we started working with Louis, came up with a deal to purchase the front end of the dairy farm, basically where the old barn track and everything. With that being said, then we started into the
Councilor Barrio discussion.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, is the site, is it gonna be feasible for extended or a big amount of trucks in that area?
Yeah, we've done TIA studies, transportation analysis, and transportation infrastructure analysis and impact. Studies. We've done a lot of different studies, environmental studies of the site, and yes, it's very conducive to siting a waste transportation favorable for
Well,
waste.
since we're on the subject of transportation now, because I was going to bring it up if he didn't, given that you've done all those studies, how much, if any, more infrastructure would have to be created to satisfy the transportation needs?
So right now, all the intersections, there's been a filling intersection on 22 that's been there forever, but that's not for us. Our routing is actually through the stoplights off of 99 and back onto the River Earl Road and then back up and over. You're taking out all the dairy farm commercial traffic. You're adding in our commercial traffic. It's pretty much a wash on that. So you are talking about some additional public traffic on that River Earl Road, and the current studies have shown that there's really no need for additional infrastructure on the River Earl Road, but the county may require a turn lane or some other, infrastructure that may come from the county side.
What about the rail spur?
Analysis of a land use proposal or the TIA to make a determination on what those impacts are.
Oh, sure, you're not there yet.
Polk County would be responsible for ensuring the longevity of our transportation infrastructure. Off the cuff, I don't believe that the facility would generate more vehicle trips than what would exceed the capacity of the Highway 99 and 22 interchange. So this location is fortunate enough to have access to an interchange in two major highways. It's locationally, we think that the transportation issues would be able to be addressed, but we haven't done any analysis of that at the county level.
Could the railroad play into that?
There is railroad at the site that the applicant that has access to Albany.
But we're not looking at that right now with the rail. So there's
You're not looking at that.
there's great infrastructure already in play. Intermodal facilities in Millersburg. There's also another facility, intermodal facility in Vancouver, Washington, Tidewater has. And then gives us the option to transport up the gorge too. So we have multiple options at our disposal to get the waste to the eastern side of the state. So it costs millions to put in a spur, and so we would step into that. If there would be a need for Polk County to do it, then we'd obviously look at it. But right now, Millersburg and other areas have spent serious money on putting in the infrastructure that we would need to utilize.
And you would be going like south on 99W?
Correct.
Okay, and you're aware that,
If that is where it's headed. So.
and you're aware that there's gonna be a rotary right in there?
Correct. Right now, all the waste is headed to southbound 99, and so yes, the roundabout, right? Yeah, they're putting it right.
Massachusetts, we call rotary.
Yeah, well, I know what you mean.
All right, so anyways, so 18-wheelers are gonna be able to negotiate that?
ODOT did a road show with that and showed that you can get I forget the width of the extended length trailers and that it functions. We've, through the county process, we've done a bunch of analysis with ODOT on that roundabout facility, and I don't believe that it's an impediment to a proposal like this.
So, and then, so right now, we're in the middle of, right here, the planning, the discussion standpoint, in order to make something like this happen, we have to bulk all the waste together in Polk County in order to get the volume we need to build the infrastructure. And infrastructure costs a lot of money to build, as you guys know, and you have to be, forward thinking, forward planning on that. So we're currently in these discussions right now, obviously with Polk County. Now, after that, you look at site development, construction. Our goal would be to try to start, if we can get everybody on board and everything together, agreements with Polk County in play, conditional use permitting. There's a lot we have to still go through to try to break ground in 2025. I don't know if that's possible to be done by 2025. Our target goal would be to try to open up in 2027, 9 years, but it may be 10 years from our starting point. So that's why we're talking today about waste infrastructure, and why do you start planning today if you know something's going to be closed in 12 years? And then, sorry,
He answered my question.
okay, so now let's talk about cost, right? One of the challenges is you got to pay for infrastructure. Infrastructure costs more money. So why did you not talk about it? Why did it not happen in the 70s? Why did it not happen in the 80s? Why did it not happen in the 90s? Why are we talking about it today? We're talking about it today because we're closing in on this point right here, where when you build it, it's a pretty quick payoff for the customer. So you either build on the front end, there's low cost to the customer, or when you build on the back end, your customer's still paying because they're now paying more in landfill rates and paying more in other end market rates. So it would have been cheaper to have the transportation in play. So you guys are right at that point right now. And you're closing in on it very fast. So at a certain point, that landfill, it has airspace to sell. So as the airspace is filling up, the value of that airspace continues to increase. There's nothing, Republic is the position when they're in that position, they have to look at their caps. They have a 1.1 million ton cap, and you're sitting at the 1.1 million tons. The only way they can get rid of tons out of there is to push pricing up. So to make it cost prohibitive, so then people start moving tons to the east side. That's what goes on, and that's where we're at today, is we're right at that point where it's showing that if you're ahead of it right now, there's a little bit of cost, but long term, you end up saving money because you've invested in the infrastructure today. Infrastructure tomorrow costs more money to build. So that line now moves up because of the cost of the infrastructure.
So part of Polk County's interest in evaluating this, we understand, what Nick is explaining now. We understand this, and one of the things that we're concerned about is the ability to control rates, and that if we get in early enough, we have some leverage to be able to negotiate, to be able to have a franchise agreement where the county can set rates and provide more certainty. If we wait until we have no other options, we may not end up with the ability to control rates. Because we're just going to have need to be able to move our waste out of our community, and we'll have less leverage to negotiate. And so, they're finding that sweet spot of when the perfect time to add additional cost to consumers, which none of us want to do as public officials. How do you nail that perfect time to get the best deal for your citizens? And we believe that we're approaching that now.
And it's not just landfills. This applies in the compost facilities. This applies into commingled recycling. All your other sorts too. It's the same goes here.
Austin or Greg, whoever wants to address it, since we're talking about timing now, what is the county's intent of, when do you want to make a decision about franchising?
We'd like to make, our goal was to make a decision this fall. The applicant has an obligation to meet in terms of being able to get his end of this proposal in play, and so he has timelines. And so we want to be timely in making a decision, but at the same time, we want to make a good decision. And I'm not necessarily going to allow, a very tight timeline on the applicant's side to pressure us into making a quick and rash decision. But we do have to be considerate of that, because if we wait too long and we take too long to deliberate and we vacillate, then our opportunity here is going to evaporate. because he won't be able to meet his end of the deal. So there is a little bit there. And, I would say realistically by the end of the year, I want to be in a position to be able to make a recommendation to my Board of Commissioners as to whether or not this is a good proposal.
Sure, and if you got too far behind the curve, then your price is shooting up.
I don't believe that, I think we're right at the precipice of that. I don't think that that there's this immediacy that we need to make a decision now. But I do believe that we need to seriously consider a proposal like this. And that's my assessment.
One of my restraints real quick is the land restraint, right? So a landowner is gonna only let you tie up the land for so long. Yeah. And at a certain point, he wants to move that to something
I was
else.
delicately trying to say that.
So anyhow, so that is, and then that site's gone. Then you start over again.
I just want to make sure that I'm understanding correctly, so I'm going to dumb it down to my level. So we're really deciding today, we've talked a lot about the landfill being full, but we're not talking about building a new landfill.
Correct.
So we've done a lot of talking about a landfill being full, but really what we're talking about is taking the Rick Rail Dairy and building a place where we take all of the waste and we unpack it and we sort it and we transfer it to new places, but somehow that costs more and we're saving gas, diesel, by transferring it in big trucks on roads that are falling apart in, what did you call them? Not roundabouts. Rotaries.
The rodeo will be brand new.
Right, which isn't gonna impact the people that live there. And we're gonna take that to Eastern Oregon. And this is all better for Mother Earth.
You have the option to take it Eastern Oregon, correct?
Well, where else are we gonna take it, because
Coffin
Coffin
Butte-
Butte's gonna be full.
Correct, and we're not saying, I'm not saying
But
what's
can
best
you just
for.
tell me whether or not I dumbed it down correctly?
Yeah, but I'm not arguing what's best, and all I'm saying is, look, there's a portion of your waste that ends up in a landfill. Okay, and until we can find better sources of end markets, and we'll get into why you build these facilities too, because it gives you better options in order to hit other marketplaces. Because if you don't have this infrastructure, your choices right now are your end markets today. So if you want to do something different with your waste, if there is another option out there of an end market, you can't do anything because you can't get it there right now.
I think that there's,
So
I think that
How
you're,
does it save 33,000
Yeah.
gallons of diesel
so right
to ship something
to the
from
same locations.
instead of Coffin Butte to Eastern
No,
Oregon?
so this is going to the current same end markets, and that was what was here on.
Oh,
I
I see, not to
current.
Eastern
So if you're
Oregon.
using the current system right now,
Okay.
this is the efficiencies of the current system. You gain within the current system.
and this was made confusing because the rate impacts that we're evaluating at the county are predicated on taking that waste to Eastern Oregon. Because that is essentially
And that has to
Coffin
cost more.
if Coffin Butte was to close, that would be our worst case scenario.
Well, it's not if, it's when, it's just,
It's
yeah.
when, that's right, I'm
So
trying
we're built
to
in
be
worst case.
delicate here, so really what we're looking at the county is what is the highest impact cost-wise to your citizens? And that's what we wanted the applicant to provide us, and that's what the applicant provided. If the waste was to go to Eastern Oregon, this is what it would cost our citizens per month. And then we broke that out for each one of our cities, and we had our consultant independently verify that information. What a transfer facility in general would allow, it would allow all of the franchises in Polk County, that includes the West Salem franchises, Monmouth, Independence, Polk County's franchises, your franchises, to negotiate waste disposal costs collectively, right? So rather than each individual going and trying to negotiate a rate, we're able to be collectively negotiate. And so when you look at that graph that Nick was showing as we're reaching the end capacity of Coffin Butte, the cost of disposal there are going to continue to rise. And so as it continues to rise, there's going to be an incentive for them to increase the cost of disposal. And the thought is that if we are able to handle, for Dallas, it was a $2.84 a month impact. If we're able to absorb those costs now, it could save us money in the not too distant future. And I don't have a crystal ball to say when we're gonna hit that cross point, but if the tipping fees at Coffin Butte hit $80, this starts to become, work in our benefit. And I know that some of our haulers we're paying $42 a month or a ton in tipping fees, and that's moving to $60 a ton in 2025. And so we are seeing this increase in cost. This is a real thing that's happening. And so this just allows us to be able to work together collectively. And what we're asking for as a county is your willingness to explore an intergovernmental agreement with us to see whether or not this would be a good fit for you, and get that sense before we grant a franchise for anything.
So can I kind of real fast here, Nick, and just say, we have about 10 minutes left before the meeting ends, before this transition. So it would be good to maybe finish up with the questions, get to, the important material, and then follow-up questions I can gather from council, and we can address those outside the meeting.
And Chris, to get back real quick from Mother Nature, we have part of this where we're just gonna pull out the C&D material, so we can actually get up to construction C&D and get actually.
So you gotta explain what C&D is.
Construction demolition, right? Your commercial demolition debris that can actually be sorted out. That right now ends up in a landfill. So there are great environmental benefits to this. Producer take-back programs, everything else. So let's talk about early transfer stations. A lot of people remember these. These are what replaced the basically the neighborhood landfill. Okay, so the ones that were in the 70s and 60s. The old unlined landfills that we have a lot of them around the state of Oregon that are all closed out, we put in first generation transfer facilities. That is what these are. They're more open, exposed to elements, but basically we're only handling mainly one stream. That's pretty much everything ended up in the landfill. Okay. Second generation, it's like, let's get some safety updates, let's get some vector controls started into play. We're starting to deal with a couple different sorts now. Early 90s, you started having some recycle programs coming in, and some in the late 80s. So you started having that. We started having multiple sorts show up. So we started designing our transportation stations a little bit more efficient to handle more sorts. Third generation or fourth generation, we're fully enclosed to deal with winds, smells, a lot of your vector issues, and this is kind of more of a modern day to also deal with rain, water, make sure it didn't intermix with the solid waste that's coming in, and also dust and the rest. Okay, now this is more of what our facilities are coming to. This is more of a true modern transfer facility. We call them hubs now. Basically, if you think about your waste stream, there is a lot of different opportunities in your waste stream to go to a lot of different markets, end markets. But without transfer facilities or out transfer hubs, you cannot get it there. You cannot rebulk it to be able to look at the other opportunities out there. So this is a modern facility. You have a producer take-back programs. It's built to operate in harmony with the neighbors, to deal with dust, smells, and a lot of the other vector control issues that we would have, litter and the rest. What does this mean? Local ownership, 18 family wage jobs, new tax revenues that can be invested in the local communities in our state, long-term rate stability, so that's that rate stability that we're talking about, synergies with local businesses because we shop local, maximizing recycle reuse within the current waste streams. So we're once again talking about other opportunities within your current waste stream and getting it to those end markets. Efficiency to help reduce air pollution, fuel, energy use, road wear and tear. When you're not running all over with a bunch of different vehicles, when you're bulked up, now you're running with fewer vehicles down the road. Also helping, one of the cool stories here is kind of the Oregon way with taking something old, repurposing it, making it into something great. So Louis had something pretty special there. We plan to build on his legacy to create something very special for the community too. Help support the circular economy, and that's reverse distribution is the only way you're ever going to get the circular economy. If you keep going down the same path, run your truck straight to the landfill, you're never going to get down circular economy. There you go. There you go.
Do you have an estimate on how many tipping bays that will fit there in a recreal area?
Yeah, so we have, what we designed is we actually designed this. So basically, when you hit a certain point, the queuing and efficiencies that we have, be able to pull people through, this facility can easily handle up to 500,000 tons from about 100,000 tons that we're building it for. So there's about 90,000 tons that are going to be going into it, roughly between all the different sorts, green waste, commingled, route tonnage, public, all your different other.
How many buildings would you estimate will be going in there?
So the main transfer facility building is this, right now Louis has similar barns to these through here. We're gonna be demoing all those out and we'd be building about a 70,000 square foot facility into it. Commercial will be utilizing the inside, these ends, the
That would
east
be
and
your
west side.
haulers, commercial.
Yeah, commercial haulers, so it's all about efficiencies, right? They'll have their own skilling side, which is actually over here out of the picture, so they'll be coming in, queuing in. It's all about getting them back on route. We should be able to turn them in and out of the facility. We do it right now in Brooks in about 11 minutes, so we should be able to do it a little bit faster here, about 10 minutes in and out. Public will be able to come into their own facilities. They got their own inbound and outbound skills, so they'll be quicker in and out. You have your producer take-back program, your recycling center right here, see here, so then the public, and they can all be closed down at night, lock up secured. So clean, modern facility. These are your more storage facilities, so your larger, because once again, when you go back to rebulking, you need a lot of space in order to rebulk the materials back into gaylords and other large forklift palletized and everything else in order to reload them into large dry vans to head back to end markets. So you're really starting to set up, what's set up on the front side of your economy in order to get to a circular economy has to be set up on the back side of your economy. So you have to start thinking about reverse distribution. And this is really Polk County's step into reverse distribution in a circular economy. So.
What is the life expectancy of the Boardman facility?
Oh, Eastern Oregon has hundreds of years of capacity.
Hundreds of years?
Yeah, 200 years. It's incredible how much, and that's just a landfill, right? Do I see stuff ending up in the landfill towards the future? No. It's going to change as more and more programs keep coming. But one of the things we have to be careful of, we made a big mistake with commingled when we first launched it, right? We became highly dependent on international markets. And we took that material, we rebulked it all, we built it all up, and we shipped it over. And we shipped it to markets that had no environmental regulations or controls. They didn't have Subtitle D landfills. They picked out what they wanted, and guess what happened to the rest of it?
And you took it on the chin when they stopped accepting stuff.
Everybody took on it, all of us did. But it was actually a good thing because, quite frankly, we were shipping over a lot of garbage, and they were pulling out what they wanted. And why do you think there's a garbage triangle in the Pacific Ocean? Okay, so we need to take responsibility for our waste. And that also means creating end markets in a circular economy in long term. It's going to take time, but now we can at least be able to check end markets. And DEQ is coming out with the RMA, Recycling Modernization Act. They're really getting into it. They're really going to be checking and verifying backside markets and what can be recycled, what can't be. We're headed in there. But in the meanwhile, yes, landfills are an integral part of our system. I'd rather have it put in a Subtitle D landfill in Oregon than shipped overseas and closest ravine that has no pollution controls. So until we have the ability to do that.
So one, maybe two more questions. So under this concept, we would collectively be negotiating the rates. And we would still have our own agreement that would result in franchise fees to the city still, or how's that work?
So you would still have a franchise fee from your franchise haulers. And essentially, the applicant would be able to negotiate and find the best tipping fees for all of our haulers rather than our haulers independently. So you would still have your same franchise fees from your hauler, and you'd have an intergovernmental agreement theoretically with Polk County that would basically say that you're going to send your throughput waste through this facility. This facility would then have rate control from the county. So the county would control what the rates that the applicant can charge the cities and its haulers for disposal and for self-haul. And then they would independently be finding the best rates for us and the ability to negotiate the best rates. And likely that would be Coffin Butte. I mean, we talked with Republic Services and they still want our waste. And so we're assuming that our waste would continue to go there in the near term. But in the long term, this would provide the infrastructure for us to be able to shop other markets.
I'm going to have to terminate this meeting because we have another meeting in a couple of minutes, so. Thank
Sorry,
you.
a little more than 3 minutes there.
Thank you for answering all my questions.
I really appreciate you.
Yeah, and if there are more, can I just finish real quick? If there are more questions from the council for Nick or the county, send them to